5 seconds. He's going to throw it. Howard leaps. He has it. Touchdown. Carolina back from the dead to tie the game with 2 seconds to go. Snap back, spot down. The kick is cleanly away. It is good.
And
Nick
it's
Barber with a
yes, sir.
54-yard field goal. And how about them Tar Heels? They do it.
Here's Kupak. Gives off to Amos. He's got it. He's Unbelievable. Unreal.
Jordan back to kick. It's blocked again. Picked up. It'll be a touchdown, Carolina, for Bracy Walker. He blocks his second punt and scores his second touchdown of the season. It's 14-13. Mr. Jordan meet Mr. Walker.
Bernard fields it at the 26. Heading to the far side. Gio at the 35. Gio, he's at the 50. No, he's not. Yes, he is. Gio, he's going to take it for a touchdown. Are you kidding me?
This is the Heel Tough Blog Podcast on Spreaker.com. We welcome in the man that writes the college football Bible. I am so excited to have him back on. It is Phil Steele. Sir, you just mentioned to me, you're going through what you consider your fun time of year, but I think for all of us diehard college football fans, and probably yourself, you feel that, being able to write about college football and break it down for 365 days a year, that's got to be just the most exciting job on the planet, isn't it? Is it not?
Yeah, it's a lot of work, Anthony, and I mentioned that my fun time is actually the summertime because magazine season, which starts the Sunday after Thanksgiving and goes all the way through the end of May, 6 full months, we're stressing, I'm on deadlines, and then football season comes, and it's those 100-hour work weeks where you're just trying to take in every game from the week and analyze everything that just happened in the past week and get ready for the next weekend. But this time of year, heck, I'm doing, my radio shows during the day and talking football. What the heck? That's pretty easy.
Well, yeah, I'm glad that we were able to get you on, and hopefully you'll have a little fun talking a little Tar Heel football. I wanted to start, just give me your initial reaction to when Mack Brown was hired, and now what do you think of the hire? I mean, someone like you that is, has been around college football for as long as you have, I think you might have had a little bit of a different perspective on it than maybe some of the younger writers when it first happened.
Yeah, I'm very happy with the hire of Mack Brown, and we're losing him at ESPN, unfortunately, but that's okay because I think he's going to do a great job at North Carolina, and he's a guy that still has the fire in his belly, still going to get it done. And the key when you hire a guy like Mack Brown coming in is probably the coordinators. And look at the two coordinators that he hired: a guy like Phil Longo on the offense, Jay Bateman on the defense, who did wonders at Army last year. Those are two significant hires. And, I went through the entire team with Coach Brown. He knows his team inside and out. He's not just a guy that's a figurehead up there. He's a guy that's really anxious to get this thing turned around. And let's face it, I think he actually steps into a pretty good situation because if you look at Larry Fedora's last 2 years, pretty much if it could go wrong, it went wrong for the Tar Heels, starting with all those suspensions last year, then the myriad of injuries. Every time a quarterback seemed to be taking control last year, he would get injured. I think Mack Brown steps into a pretty good situation.
Now, let me ask you about Phil Longo because there were some concerns initially, really that were kind of spurred on by people that are around Ole Miss and are Ole Miss fans. When it comes to Phil Longo, is this a guy that, can move the ball down the field but did have trouble scoring in the red zone, or is that a little bit blown out of proportion by some of the people around Ole Miss and some of the fans?
Well, that was the case with Ole Miss last year at times, and a lot of that was because they were almost a pure passing offense at times. You look at the fact that what Ole Miss had was dynamic receivers, and you've got to take advantage of your best assets. And A.J. Brown, DeMarcus Lodge, DK Metcalf, those are assets you want to take advantage of, plus a veteran quarterback. So that'll hurt you in the red zone a little bit. Now, here at North Carolina, the running backs are easily the strongest and deepest position on the entire team, with Javonte Williams, Antonio Williams, Michael Carter. And I've followed Phil Longo since his days in FCS, and I can tell you that his teams can run the football, and I think this year's team will run the football, and that's that's going to help them out in the red zone. So the problems that they had last year at Ole Miss were, one, I thought Ole Miss was a little overrated coming into the year, and B, the talent he had spoke to being a more of a pass attack offense, and that's going to hurt you in the red zone.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with the fact that the running game for the Tar Heels is going to be probably their strength on offense. Now, when it comes to the quarterback position, you mentioned that last year, every time that they got someone rolling at quarterback, mostly the two redshirt freshmen, both guys went down with injuries. Now both of those guys are back, and Nathan Elliott has moved on as a graduate assistant, and they've got a new guy in there, and Sam Howell, who comes in, who's a true freshman. When you look at this quarterback battle, we saw a little bit of it in the spring game, but it's still, I think, a pretty decent ways off from being decided. Who do you think has the edge out of these three quarterbacks, or did Mac Brown maybe give you something that he's not telling us local media guys?
Well, Coach Brown did say in the spring game that Sam Howell started, but it's because he won a rock, paper, scissors contest to be the starter. But just going over the conversation and my thought process put into it, I'm actually projecting Sam Howell as the starting QB. And that's not something Mac Brown said. He clearly said it's a three-man duel. They're going to see who does the best over the summer. Right. They're going to see who does the best in August. And I honestly believe that that's the case. But I like what I saw to Cade Fortin last year. I like what I saw to Rudder. Rudder's probably the best athlete. He's a big, strong kid. He's a dual-threat guy that can run. You go to Cade Fortin, he's a quality QB. Now, last year he only hit 49%. But I think a lot of that was the situation he was in. He's 6'3", 210, can throw the ball. And then you take a look at Sam Howell. May have a little bit of Baker Mayfield type stuff in him. I think he's a guy that's going to be able to work and win the job. And this was one of the tougher QB calls for me because I really didn't get an idea from the coach who was going to start, but I went with the true freshman.
So when you look at the wide receiving core, Phil Longo has always had really good wide receivers, and we saw that the last 2 years at Ole Miss for him. I know that Daz Newsome's the guy that everybody's going to focus on, but is there another name that you're keeping an eye on to be a guy that maybe catches the football a little bit more this year than he did last year and surprise some people around the ACC?
Yeah, I'm going to go with De'Ami Brown then. If you're not mentioning Newsome, and I think Newsome is probably the top guy, but De'Ami Brown is a guy 6'1", 185, so he's a little bit bigger than Newsome. Probably the fastest receiver on the team. Your clear deep ball threat. He's got track speed. And last year as a true frosh, he only caught 17 passes. But I think that was part due to the quarterbacks. I mean, how many quarterbacks North Carolina played? 15, 20 of them last year, it seemed. I think that with better, more solid quarterback play, you'll see him be a bigger factor. So I'm going to go with De'Ami Brown. So when you look at the offensive line, and this is the last thing we'll touch on with the offense, this seems like a unit that is in pretty good shape, despite losing a guy in J.J. McCargo who steps away due to medical reasons. But for the most part, I mean, you look at Nick Polino, who's actually going to move over to center. He's a veteran guy that, has seemed to improve every year. Charlie Heck on the outside has just been, he's been the rock on the outside. There's no other way to put it. And then some of the other guys, I like Jordan Tucker a lot at offensive tackle who comes in. So is this a unit that Tar Heel fans should be feeling pretty confident about on the offensive line? Yeah, and in fact, surprisingly, in my offensive line ratings in the magazine, I've got the Tar Heels rated number 22. So I think the biggest question mark probably on the interior, what they've got at the center and the guard positions, and there still could be some shakeup there. But I think they're solid at tackle. They've got experience, and I believe that they will have an improved offensive line this year, and they can only stay healthier.
Talking to the man that writes the college football Bible, it is Phil Steele with us. Want to flip over to the defensive side of the football. It looks like the offense is going to be what's going to drive this team, mostly because there just isn't a whole lot of depth. There is some talent, but the depth there is very thin. The best unit, I would say, in my mind, would be the defensive line. There were some injuries in the spring, but if these guys can get healthy, guys like Jason Strobridge, Timon Fox, this gives the Tar Heels a good chance to succeed. When you look at this defensive line, where do you see this group stacking up? Because I feel like this is one that's being underrated by a lot of the national people.
Yeah, I would agree. I did put him in my top defensive line rankings at the front of the magazine. And, going back to the hard luck that Coach Fedora had, you take a guy like Aaron Crawford. Last year when I talked to Coach Fedora and was going through the team with him in the spring, he said that Aaron Crawford is the best player on defense. And then he goes out to injury in the first game of the season.
Right.
So, I mean, that just happens. And so you've got Crawford, you got Strobridge, you got Fox. I do think the defensive line is probably, depth might be your biggest concern because you've got to play 2 units. But I love their starting 3. And I think that Crawford and Strobridge both have NFL potential for the nose guard defensive end spot. And Fox can definitely get some pressure on the quarterback. He only had 2 sacks last year, but I think he's going to have a much bigger year this year.
I totally agree with that, and I think he's actually a great fit in Jay Bateman's defense. Now, Jay Bateman's defense really does thrive on athletic linebackers, and unfortunately for him, he won't have Cole Holcomb, who ended up graduating and actually getting drafted into the NFL. But when you look at this linebacker unit, it's an interesting one because I think there are some guys with real potential like Jonathan Smith, who just really hasn't been able to put it all together. And there's a couple other names that I think a lot of people will be keeping an eye on. When you look at that linebacker unit, outside of the depth concerns, who do you think has to step forward in order for that Tar Heel linebacking core to take a step forward from where they've been the last few years?
I think the best linebacker, probably Dominique Ross coming in, 6'3", 220, can be a dominant player. He's got length, can run, and he's a good pass rusher as well. So he's a guy that, in the Bateman defense is going to be used as that pass rusher type. The intriguing one to me is probably Chance Surratt, the ex-quarterback that moved over. And Surratt's a guy that can run. He's physical and could be really good. I think that he requested the move to linebacker, and I think, 4 tackles, 1 sack in the spring game. I'm looking forward to see how he adjusts to the linebacker position. I think he's going to do well.
And so when you look at the secondary, this was a position that, under Larry Fedora was relatively successful. He put out a bunch of really good guys there. I think when you look at the secondary, there is some talent here with guys like Patrice Renee and Miles Dorn, but there is some concern here, especially at safety when it comes to depth. When you look in this secondary, is this a unit that you can feel confident in outside of Renee and Dorn, or are there just too many question marks?
Yeah, they recently added Bryce Watts, right, from Virginia Tech?
Right, but I do believe he is going to have to sit out. That would be a humongous break if we were able to add him.
Yeah, that would be a big thing if he's able to come in because he was a 12-game starter at Virginia Tech. But as you touched on, when you got Dorn's a guy that has NFL potential at the free safety spot, so I like that. He's an impact leader, an impact player, and a leader. Now, he missed the spring, but I think he'll be 100% for the fall. You got guys like Ross and Woolfolk have starting experience, but they may lose their jobs. You look at that guy like Cam Kelly, the true freshman coming in.
Right.
He's a quarterback in high school. He's big. He can run. He's a transfer from Auburn. I think he can come in, actually steal one of the cornerback jobs and give him an upgrade at that position. So overall, I do think North Carolina will have a solid secondary.
Really intriguing there. Yeah, I would definitely. That's what we like to hear. Mac Brown wanted competition, and if that does happen, that would be amazing. So when you look at the special teams unit, that was one of the specialties under Larry Fedora. Those were always probably the units that everybody was taking a look at. And you get a guy like Daz Newsome coming back, who will handle punt returns, might handle kick returns as well. But really, the kicking game, I think, is important, especially if what we talked about with Phil Longo's offense, where they had some struggles scoring in the red zone, does end up coming back at Carolina. So when you look at this special teams unit, I mean, is this a unit that can, at the least, help keep Carolina from losing those games close like they did a year ago?
Well, you touched on it. Coach Fedora did a phenomenal job with special teams. You look at the last 4 years' rankings, they ranked number 22, number 20, number 33, and number 34 in my special teams rankings. And, North Carolina's coming off seasons where they were 3-9 and 2-9. You don't normally get in the top 35 in years like that, but North Carolina was. Now, this year, the reason they're not up in my top of the rankings is just there are some questions. I need to see how the new players do. But you look at the kicker, Michael Rubino, a grad transfer from our Appalachian State. He's a guy that's done well there. He had 15 of 21 field goals in 16. And then Ben Kiernan, the true freshman punter. Coach Brown felt he was one of the best high school punters in the country coming in. Maybe he can win that job. And if he does, he averaged 45.8 on his punts with 23 of them inside the 20 last year. And then as you touched on, if you got a guy like Daz Newsome returning your punts at 15.1 yards per catch, the potential's there for them to remain strong on special teams, and that could be huge.
Last question with the man that writes the college football Bible, Phil Steele. When you look at this schedule, the more that I've looked at it, the front of that schedule is going to be tough. And there are a lot of people that think there is some potential for there to be a Scott Frost at a Nebraska-like start where you do end up going 0-4, 0-5. I mean, is that what you're kind of seeing? I mean, from my perspective, I really hope not. But is that front of the schedule really the toughest part of the schedule for the Tar Heels?
Well, there are 3 games early on that really intrigue me, and I think are going to be the key to North Carolina's season overall. You go to the Wake Forest game. Yes, it's on the road. It is a non-conference game. I realize that, but it's big for the overall season because if you want to get to a bowl game, you got to get 6 wins. Right. I rate that game close to a toss-up. I think North Carolina can play with Wake Forest. It's good to see that rivalry renewed. They haven't played each other for a little bit, and that's a game where I've got Wake a very slight favorite. Then you look at the App State game, and App State's got a new head coach as well. So you wonder if App State's going to be as good as they were last year. Now, they will be fresh off a bye. North Carolina will be playing their 4th straight game, but that's a game North Carolina's got the potential to win. And then the Georgia Tech one as well on the road. GT's got a brand new head coach, but I think the learning curve for Georgia Tech's new head coach in Jeff Collins going to be a little bit steeper than Mac Brown's in the fact that he's taken option personnel and trying to convert them into a pro-style spread more. And that's going to usually, as we saw with Scott Frost last year, take a little bit of time. They were going from a pass offense to more of an option-oriented spread offense, and it took Nebraska a little bit of time. So I think North Carolina's got a shot in all 3 of those games. And if they pick those 3 up, you look at the second half of the season, Duke at home, Virginia at home, I think is a game they'd have a shot at. Mercer at home, those are all games that, North Carolina has a legitimate shot at. So how they do in those 3 games early will be the key.
Well, we're looking forward to it. It's going to be an exciting season. And thank you, Phil, for joining us. This has been amazing, as always. I know last year you were a big hit. This year you'll probably be just as big of a hit. We love it. And you gave us some great insight. So tell the people just really quickly where they can find you on social media and where they can find the magazine so they make sure they have it.
Well, I appreciate that, Anthony. You can find me on Twitter. It's at Phil Steele 042. That's at Phil Steele 042. You can go to my website, which is philsteele.com. Order the magazine there. You can download it to your iPad, Android device, Kindle, or even your computer. That is philsteele.com. And finally, go to the newsstands. June the 25th, it hits Barnes & Noble, Walmart, Books A Million, CVS, Target, Walgreens. 352 pages. I feel it's got 3 to 4 times the amount of information in any other college football preview magazine.
I will not argue with you on that. I get it every year, and it's one of my favorite reads, really, of anything that I read all year. So, Phil, hey, thanks for joining us. Best of luck this college football season, and we'll talk to you down the line, probably next season around this same time, to help preview the 2020 Tar Heels.
Sounds great, Anthony. Always great talking Tar Heel football with you.
All right. Yes, sir. You take care, and we'll talk to you down the line. All right, so that's Phil Steele, the man that writes the College Football Bible. Always one of my favorites to get on this podcast. We literally went through every position group and broke it down for you guys. That was phenomenal. I cannot say how excited I am. That was great, and he gave us a lot of great insight. I mean, this is a team that I think a lot of people are still trying to figure out at this time. What exactly is this 2019 Tar Heel team going to be? You know, you've got a lot of energy that's coming back into the program. There is a lot of talent here. There's not that much depth. The schedule is a little front-loaded, but that could lend well if you can get some wins early on. So we'll have so many more previews coming up. We got guys coming in. I know Athlon Sports, we're going to have Steve Lassen, who was with us last year, stop by. We're going to hit up Bill Bender again soon from the Sporting News, and he'll come on and help preview the 2019 Tar Heels. But Phil Steele, what a phenomenal job. Can't believe that we were able to get him on back-to-back years, and hopefully we'll be able to get him on again next year. So You can find the podcast on Spreaker, iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, iHeartRadio, TuneIn.com, and the TuneIn app. You're going to want to check that out. You can also go to the website, www.HeelToughBlog.com/podcast, and that's where you can find the Heel Tough Blog podcast. We got so many great things going on there. Yesterday, talked to David Hale about Mac Brown and everything that he's got going on. He's a guy that is pretty high on Mac Brown, and David is a guy that is close to the ACC, so get his perspective on an article that he wrote earlier in the year. Of course, you can go back and listen to our interviews with some of the local newspaper guys from the 2020 commits area. So we got Langston Wirtz Jr., the Charlotte Observer, talking about the guys that were committed at the time in the Charlotte area. Of course, everything on the recruiting trail now has taken off. So we got some guys that maybe weren't committed at the time that are committed now that might not be on there. But we also got Malik Hornsby talk from Adam Coleman of the Houston Chronicle. We've got Richard Davenport on Jacoby Criswell, who just got his team announced for the opening. He'll be part of Team Money. So if you're a guy that really gets into the opening, I mean, we'll be keeping an eye on everything that's going on out there as well. Then you know where to find Jacoby Criswell now. And as we mentioned, ton of news on the recruiting trail. The one place that you can find everything that's going on is www.HeelToughBlog.com. Read about all four of the commitments in the last 5 days. See, I'm just going nuts with everything that's been going on this recruiting trail, and that's just in the 2020 class. There's also an article up there about 2021 commit Dontavius Nash, who became the first commitment in the 2021 class this past weekend after the Showtime camp. I mean, there are so many things going on with Tar Heel football on the recruiting trail, so make sure you keep up with everything. We also got an article up there where you can read who we think are the most important targets for the Tar Heels to land to continue this 2020 class. There are 10 guys up there. At the time that the idea for the article came about, there were only 15 guys committed in the class. So that makes a little bit of sense. Now, landing all 10 of those guys probably won't happen, but there are some interesting names that you'll want to read about on there, and just read who are the guys that we think the Tar Heels should prioritize. We got some big-time information coming up about something that we're going to do before the South Carolina game. I want you guys to keep an eye on the Facebook page. That's the place where you can follow everything. Like and follow the Facebook page. It's Heel Tough Blog on Facebook. You can find everything you need there. Also, go over to Twitter and follow us at Heel Tough Blog, or you can just follow my account on Twitter as well, at Future Tar Heel. That's where you can find all the information. I'll be retweeting stuff about Tar Heel football. That's pretty much my entire timeline. There's some other stuff that's sprinkled in there. Most of my other sports teams will also get on the timeline as well, but for the most part, it's Tar Heel football. So, we want to thank Phil Steele for stopping by. We want to thank you guys for listening as always, and as always, go Tar Heels!